Wargaming Campaigns by Henry Hyde. We are using this as our Bible, and I guess that makes this our, St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas. We're using these to generate and run and manage an imaginations campaign set on the world of, I just went ahead and called it Hyde's Reach so that we have a name for the planet. We've got two nations. They are Osterregnum to the south and Septemtria to the north. In the last video, we set up our political situation where Osterregnum has, it's complicated. Thanks to Henry, we've got a complicated political situation. We assume there's two political parties up north, two in the south, and the political party up north was looking to reunify the two nations with what they see as a breakaway republic down south. So the two leaders, the two parties in power were having secret talks behind the scenes, and the opposition parties both oppose that. To give ourselves a little bit more context, I imagine this being a extraterrestrial colony world, that the day on which the original landing occurred is a popular day. As this video goes live, we're in early July. I thought, okay, well, let's just use July 4th as the big global holiday that all of these people can enjoy is Landing Day. It's kind of like the Union and the Confederacy in the United States. Guys on both sides of that fight respected George Washington and respected the founding of their nation. It's just that there were two nations at the time. So in much the same way, the forces of Osterregnum, the people of Osterregnum, look back to Landing Day with some fondness, even if they are independent from the forces from the nation of Septemtria now. Now, normally, there would be some kind of reconciliation, and there'd be a big ceremony up here on July 4th, but in an effort to a bit of ecumenism, if you will, the leader of Septemtria offered to come down and celebrate July 4th, that weekend, with a big friendship ceremony down here in Osterregnum, and that way he could continue the talks face to face. It was kind of a big deal. It was in all the papers. What he didn't realize is that the auditor, think of it as like a corporate Supreme Court, would pick that date to release the findings that these illegal talks were being held and would force a re-election, a corporate realignment. The board of directors, which is normally split 50-50 up here in the north, at the behest of the leader so that he could cast the tiebreakers, suddenly with him out of commission thanks to the auditor, the acting director calls for an election, and lo and behold, he takes power. So you have an odd situation going on here, and of course he's got 2 or 3 days to consolidate that power while these guys are still getting their act together. Of course, upon receiving word of that, the leader of Osterregnum spies an opportunity. He immediately places the leader of the northern country, I need to get some names for these guys, under house arrest for his protection, you see, and pledges the support of the southern military to go take care of these guys that launched a hostile takeover, a coup, if you will. Now, of course, everyone recognizes that he's taking advantage of the political situation to secure additional, what would you call it, considerations. In fact, in such a fluid environment as this, he sees an opportunity for maybe, instead of combining these two nations, maybe he can carve off a significant southern chunk. If he can seize this village of 4 and this silver mine and this railhead, then suddenly the border between the two nations, he gets all of this valuable agricultural land down here in the lowlands along the, I really need to print up one of these maps. It's got all the names on it too, don't I? This is the DJ River. It's a fluid situation. That may change over time. Essentially, what we talked about is that the forces of the South are launching a spearhead into the north, which is lightly defended, and of course a full regiment, 3 full battalions, 9 companies of men, sweep up to the north in a couple of days, and they can do this as soon, so the political situation goes pear-shaped on the Friday, July 5th. He says, move out. The leader, who we're going to name John Scar, by the way, after one of the most recent followers over on Ko-Fi. For those of you that have not heard, I have a little digital tip jar. If you've enjoyed the content here on the channel and you want to throw me a $5 And by that, I mean, $5, not quid. Then you can go over to co-fi.com/mrwargaming, for Mr. Wargaming, and throw a $5 in, and then I'm going to slap your name on here too. So, for example, this is the Prostibulum Bay. These are the Skooky Tramp Mountains. Prostibulum is it's a bastardization of somebody. The two capitals, Captain Hook and Shevlinton, are named after the founders. Of course, the Captain Hook must be the guy that landed the spaceship here at the starport. And, of course, Shevlinton is his name. So these were the first two backers over there. Anyway, point being, we said, okay, well, the South is going to invade the North here. And today, we need to take care of a few administrative processes before we can figure out what the actual results of that are. Bar in mind, it's the first week of July. I'm going to try to keep these videos in about 1-to-1 time. We're solo wargaming. It's not going to be strictly 1-to-1 time, but nobody uses strictly. You go a little bit ahead, a little bit back. You try to keep up. If we get too far ahead, I may pause the release of these videos. But for now, the key here is that we know that the leader of the Defense Forces, the Vice President of the Defense Directorate of the South, John Scarr, total beast, total boss, maybe not the smartest. He delayed for a day. He got orders, move out. He said, yeah, I'm going to make sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. And then they moved out on Sunday. Monday, they're going to arrive up here, barring any unforeseen circumstances like weather, which we're going to get to shortly. But as I said, I want to know what the defense leader, the Vice President of the Defense Directorate, or the Director of Defense of the North here, I want to know what his 6 stats are. This comes directly from Henry Hyde's book. He uses 6 stats, very similar to D&D. We roll percentage, and the first one is going to be, he is going to have an intelligence of 42. Maybe not the smartest, but this is a political situation, right? Initiative of 53, and this may help explain. He's of average initiative, thanks to old William Sylvester's book. These guys delay by 5 weeks before they even start to mobilize their armed forces. At the start of the hostilities, both of these nations have a single, what we're calling you can think of it as a division, but this is a fairly lightly populated land. There's only 2 million people on the map, and it's a fairly substantial map. It's about the size, I want to say like North Dakota, maybe both of the Dakotas altogether. And so the armed forces are a little bit smaller than you might expect. Regiments is what we're calling them. The South can call up a maximum of 4 regiments, the North 5. And they each have 1 regiment, that's 9 companies of infantry, a company of military police, gendarmes with APCs. They've got support vehicles, tube artillery, and then 1 company of tanks. That's what each of these guys have to start. The South starts to mobilize immediately. They didn't realize they were going to have this opportunity until the day the tanks roll out. So they will start mobilizing. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. But let me go ahead and finish rolling up this Directorate of the North. So 56, he has a fairly average courage. He's pretty run-of-the-mill. A 30 for charisma. Not a particularly well-liked guy. We get an 87, but he is a very strong beast, and as far as health is concerned, he's okay. So he's kind of that political appointee who just kind of goes along with 67 health. Now, why am I rolling these up? I don't know yet, to be honest with you. These are essentially situational modifiers that help you inform the narrative in some cases, and once we start getting into attacking towns and cities and battles, they will play a much greater role. When we have 2 forces that meet on the road, whoever is led by the leader with the highest initiative is going to, we're going to take that into consideration. We're going to allow them a little bit more opportunity to dig in or make plans or prepare. Likewise, if one of our leaders winds up entrenched in a city that is under siege, it is cut off, and he has a poor health, then as disease sets in, and think about Baston, if the guy who was in command of, was it Easy Company? I don't know, whichever, that's the one from Band of Brothers. I don't know what division, was it a whole division in there? I don't know, I don't follow World War II so much. But imagine if the leader there died of dysentery like 2 days into the siege, then history might have gone an entirely different way. Do people typically die of dysentery in the winter, though? I don't know, consumption? Whatever, you get the idea. So that's the first thing. The second thing I wanted to deal with is the weather. As I said, the war is declared on the 5th. So these guys vote, they hold a snap election and replace the leader. By noon, he issues his order, and on the 6th, the Regnan forces cross the frontier. Instead of crossing immediately, they wait a day. They arrive at the railhead on the 7th. This is because they are in, and I might need to double check that. So they are largely in improvised vehicles. But to double check, what we can do is we can go to the proper page here in Henry Hyde's book. Multiply these numbers by 5 to determine how far and fast troops can move. Troops by rail can move 100 miles a day. And the dark lines here are rail lines, assuming that you've got rail capacity. So if you have a troop of leg infantry that arrives here, and they want to move up to here from the railhead to 8, they're not riding the trains. They only move at this speed. Maybe there's a dotted line, the highways that connect, but be that as it may, so our army that crosses, and you see how the city straddles the border here, the army is probably located at a military base that is deeper inside the frontier. The actual border of the nation cuts across this peak and comes down. So maybe there's a military defensive base here. There's probably some military defense here, but they weren't expecting hostilities. They are going to be able to immediately radio back to the capital and say, Captain Cook, we're being overwhelmed. So very small. We're doing a blitzkrieg. They move in and are going to be able to get to that railhead probably without opposition. But we'll get to that in a minute. So any troops in half tracks, that's the speed we're using. 15 times 5 is, of course, 75. And this map is at 1 inch equals 40 miles. So if we're trying to seize that railhead, we got to go about 100 miles. It's going to take a day and a half. That means they will arrive on the 8th and then start to dig in. And the nice thing about this is it does cut off the movement of troops. Maybe they want to dig in and defend this point instead of the railhead, but here they can defend against an attack from either direction. When the additional regiments of troops come online, they're going to come on at one of these major cities. This is Port Dunder, this is Pylamopolis, and this is Hethwil City. And actually it's so the 10 Jack Queen give you an idea of how big those cities are. Those are the cards we used to deal them out. So it could be that the very first regiment to come online comes in way over here, which will affect the strategy of the Septemtrians. The next order of business is to determine what the weather is. We'll start on July 5th. I am going to be using William Sylvester's refinement of weather from the Solo Wargaming Guide, but Henry Hyde offers, and remember, Henry never tells you one way to do things. He always gives you like 3 or 4 options. And this particular option here is a kind of weather barometer that he takes from and gives credit to Charlie Wesencraft in his 1974 book, Practical Wargaming. So you can see this little pegboard, you just move the peg up and down based on the results of some dice rolls. Well, that's the exact same thing that you see here in the Solo Wargaming Guide. And so what you do is you roll 2d6 to figure out where you start. And of course, we are in the month of July. And our opening day is going to be on the 9th. It's going to be clear. And then for every day, you roll a d6, and on a 1 or a 2, you shift up. And on a 5 or a 6, you shift down a box for that day's weather. So I will roll a die. I'm going to roll the black die first for the 5th and then for the 6th. So we stay and we move down. So this is on the 5th, it's clear. On the 6th, it's clear. On the 7th, it's clear. But now we're in this box. So then on the 8th, we move down again. So we move to this box. Then on the 9th, we move back up. So we're still clear. On the 10th, we move back up. So on the 10th, we're there. On the 11th, we stay. And on the 12th, we move back down. And on the 13th, that was a 4, so we stay. And then on the 14th, we stay. So here's where we are through the first 9. Let's make it around 10 days, shall we? A nice even 10. We're going to wind up right here. So clear skies all the way through. And you can see I run a number of campaigns here. I've got some eraser marks all over the place. Right to 15th there, that's how far we are. It's clear skies all the way through the 15th, and so our armies are going to be operating fairly easily. Our aircraft are going to be operating fairly easily as well. Sorties are an option every day. Of course, with the Nearness, is that the next thing we need to do? Yeah, we're going to look at air combat now. So we've done weather through the 15th. And you and I know it's clear, but they don't. So you got to keep that in mind too, right? You actually have to engage in a little bit of light role-playing. Now, as we decided, with the light kind of, red line, tripwire military patrols that are in this area, and the unexpected suddenness of these hostilities, the South was was a little more ready for this. So the next thing we need to figure out is what role does air power play? And for this, now most of the advice that Henry gives you for air power comes in the form of suggestions for an air power campaign. If you want to do the Battle of Britain, if you want to do the battle for air superiority in Korea, and it could be a lost cause. But, Korea, if I understand correctly, the NATO forces dominated the skies, but not always. And locally, there may have been some issues with getting that air power to be able to support the guys on the ground. So how are we going to do it, given that we are using a roughly like mid-20th century technology, mid to late? Well, for this, we go back to William Sylvester because he has a wonderful section on how you can incorporate air power. And it's very similar to, for those of you who have played the Warhammer science fiction games, it's similar to how those work. Oh, Billy S. gives us a nice little checklist. Roll to determine if an airstrike can take place. Well, that really revolves back to the weather. Remember, we said it's clear skies. It's the summertime, not too big a surprise. Roll to determine where the plane enters the table. Bear in mind this little suggestion for how to implement air combat in your miniature war game can be completely swapped out for the actual rules of the game that you're playing. Since we don't really have a rule set that we're looking at just yet, we're really just looking at whether or not the Septembrian Air Force can intercept and do some damage to this column of troops. So we're going to ignore a lot of this stuff. If the plane is making a strafing run on a well-defended position, there may be some kind of countermeasures. There may be anti-air missiles. These guys are on the hoof. They're on the run. They don't have any of that set up. So this is going to take us down to, if airstrikes take place at the same time from different sides, a dogfight ensues. Now, in this case, because each of these nations is relatively young and has relatively small forces, they each have one squadron of aircraft, which is basically 4 wings worth of aircraft. And we're going to play things a little bit conservative. Send both sides. Remember, both sides have fairly average initiative. We'll send a squadron out. They don't want to throw all of their dice in. They don't want to push all their chips into the table on this initial attack, because as things begin, they're evenly matched in the air power department. So they're gonna stick with that. So and fundamentally, it's just so that we can kind of fumble our way through this and figure out how airstrikes work here, where it's really the only thing we have to worry about. Each side rolls 2 differently colored dice. If the red die of one plane is higher than that of the other, the second plane is considered damaged, unable to carry out the strike, and must exit from the table. If the black die is also higher, the second plane is shot down. Okay, so these are basically, when we say a squadron, we're going to have 8 planes total, and each side has 2 planes, and we are going to roll, do I understand this right? If the red die of one is higher than that of the other, the second plane is damaged. Okay, on the previous page, and here Bill is still talking about, you've got your ground pounders set up, and they're in a fight, and at the start of the turn, you're going to roll 2 differently colored dice. Assuming that your aircraft is making a strafing run, the red die determines if they hit, and on an odd they do hit, and on an even no, the black die indicates the number of casualties. So we roll first for the guy that is trying to make his strafing run, and we get a result of, so this is the Septembrian Air Force. On an odd result, let's see, the red means, on an odd it means yes, so they hit, and they're going to do an enormous amount of casualties. However, we also have to roll for the Osterregnum interceptors. And we are going to compare the red and the black. The red die is higher, and I'm going to leave these in the south, the bottom one, right? So then go down your checklist. If the red die is higher, then the second plane is considered damaged. So the Septembrian cannot carry out the strike and exits from the table. If the black die is also higher, then the plane is considered shot down. And that, we will say, is going to require that plane is going to require well, he's shot down and is out of the campaign. In this case, that squadron, so this just means that the Osterregnum planes were able to chase the potential interceptors off, and there are no airstrikes on the Osterregnum forces. One side must roll 2 higher dice to shoot down the other plane and carry out his strike. That does mean that the Air Force for the Osterregnums is available to support the attacks on the railhead, and I think that's about it. So this is how you handle the Air Force. Essentially, the Osterregnums have air superiority for this initial part of the campaign. And we'll try to remember to do that each time. Man, I'm telling you, these modern-day combat systems are complicated. I will warn you, I don't have any experience with these, and in fact, I may have chosen a rather awkward scale at which to game this out, because there are lots of war games for the tactical level. Platoon versus platoon, where the individual maneuver elements are squads. There's lots of games where the individual maneuver elements are platoons. Not so many where the individual maneuver element is the company. Once you are up above that, once you're into those rarefied air, you're not really worried about how to take the railhead, how to take that hill, how to cross that river. You just point to a battalion and say, you guys go do that. And then the battalion commander says to a company, you take the left, that company takes the right, this company goes up the center. I am reminded of the scene from Band of Brothers when they're attacking Foy, and this, the easy company has to take the village. And the guy that's actually determining who goes where is just saying this platoon goes that way, that platoon goes that way. Because we're dealing with rather large elements, I'm not entirely sure how to fight out these battles. It's largely going to be, I think we're still going to try to gamify it to the greatest extent possible, but it's going to be a lot. First of all, I don't have miniatures. So we're going to be drawing maps, and we're going to be putting stuff, we're going to be drawing red arrows, and we're going to be rolling dice to find out when the red arrow meets the black arrow, which one wins. That's for another day. The other thing we should probably talk about is the mobilization of the additional units. Remember that, and I think we can safely say the railhead is going to be taken. Oh, but the counterattack is going to roll out of Captain Hook on what day? And I think after day 5. So it's going to roll out on the 10th. Is that what we said? The silver mines are going to be seized. Oh, so the junction is going to be seized on the 7th. And then the company of gendarmes are going to take a day to get up here to the silver mines. That's going to be the 9th. And then the real question is, how many days does it take for them to secure the town? Now, this is a full company of military personnel, 250 guys, going up against a town of, what do we say? This was like 80,000? But how many, what's the militia like? What's the police force there like? They're not equipped to handle a full-scale invasion. And in fact, there may be a full company, maybe a battalion. We leave 2 battalions down here, or maybe we send another company up. So you've got a strong military there up at number 8, and they're going to be able to seize control. How many days is it going to take before they are comfortably in control of that town? I'm just going to roll a d6, and I'm going to add that to the date they arrive. Remember, arrive on the 7th. Okay, we survive. Get up there. It's going to take a day. That's the 8th plus a d6. So 5 days later, it's going to be the 13th before this area is pacified. Now, what that means is they're going to, as long as they have the ability to move material. So right now, think about it. The Osterregnums control this river. They have adequate lines of supply. They're going to be able to start siphoning resources off from the silver mine, and that may counterbalance their relative poverty. That they are starting to loot the silver. Maybe there's a train ready to go. It's going to take some time, and they're going to have to kind of balance how much material do we send back versus how much of our resources do we commit to stealing the loot, to looting the banks, versus getting supplies up here to where these guys are defending this critical node. At some point, we're going to have to deal with the naval battle down here, and that's going to be interesting as well. But before we do that, let's talk about the mobilization of these regiments as they come online. We'll start with Septembria, and I don't feel bad rolling these right out of the gate. The leadership of each of these nations is going to have a pretty good idea how long it will take before these forces come online. And there are a couple of different units that we have to deal with. The first is that Septembria can call up a unit of mechanized infantry in APCs. Now, they're going to start either in Hethwil City or Pylamopolis. That's one of these two. So I'm going to roll a d8, and on an even, it'll be the jacks. So the APCs are going to show up in Hethwil City, and I'm going to roll a d8 and divide by 4. In a week. Hey, that's not bad. But remember, they're delayed by 5 days. Where these guys start mobilizing on the 5th, these guys start mobilizing on the 10th. That 1 week is going to be the 17th when they come online. And then, of course, they are going to have to move into position. The air cavalry, they are going to come online, of course, in the starport just outside of Captain Hook. And they will come online in D4 weeks. So 4 divided by 2, they're going to come on in 2 weeks. They have a second squadron of aircraft. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe they're going to be a little more free with their aircraft in these opening phases of the board. We may wind up sending 2 squadrons to each of these battles, but we'll get to that. Their second squadron is not going to come on for 4 weeks. That's August 7th. And then we have 2 light air recon that will also come on board here. And that's going to take 3 weeks. So that will come on the 31st. So air recon, they're going to have, once that happens. So right now, both sides have 1 unit of air recon. So they kind of negate each other, cancel each other out. But we do still have 4 more regiments that are going to come on, and each of those regiments are going to come on. There's going to be 1 in Hethwil City, 1 in the capital, 1 in Pylamopolis, and 1 over here at, what did we call that? Port Dunder. Okay, so I'm going to roll 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's going to be how many weeks these guys come on. So 1 week, oh boy, the jacks were ready. 2 weeks, and then Port Dunder is going to be 1 week. Wow, these guys are really on the ball, and 2 weeks over here. They also have 3 squadrons of cutters that will show up 1 squadron per week starting on the 17th, 24th. And so as this little campaign goes along, they're going to be able to bring the weight of numbers. The only squadron that is in the lake area right now is the squadron here in Fluid Harbor, and they're going to wind up blockading this area. Now, they can't cut off the bridge, but they can just kind of patrol and keep things. I think they actually have 2. One is patrolling the river, which will be a defensive unit, and the other one is going to be bottling up any potential counterattack and making sure that the guys up north can't get across the lake without some level of resistance. Now, once a week goes by, we hit July 17th, the 24th, the 31st. We're going to get to like a 3-to-1 ratio, and the guys up north are going to be able to punch their way out, and then they're going to have a lot more latitude and freedom of movement to use those cutters to ferry troops across the lake. Remember, the lake is only about 40, 50 miles, so they're going to be able to make 3-4 trips a day. The justification for that is that the cutters up here are ocean-going vehicles, and they need to be retrofitted and converted, and there is limited capacity for doing that. But over time, we're going to have 2, 3, 4, so we got to bear that in mind. Turning our attention to the forces down south, now we only have 3 companies of infantry that will be showing up. 1 down here, 1 here, and 1 here. I'm going to roll a d8 for 10, Jack, and Queen. And they're going to come on in 7 days, in 28 days, and 28 days. So, oh boy. At least they had the 5-day advance notice, huh? Frugford, they'll come on July 12th, come online in just a few days, and then these 2 cities are not going to have their boys ready until August the 3rd. So they're really going to be badly outnumbered here until That's a new bird we're having a good time with. It's not a squeaky wheel. Although, maybe he is a squeaky wheel, and maybe he's going to get greased. The only other reinforcements that Osterregnum will have, at least until they start getting this loot, and we may do that on a weekly basis, will be 2 battalions of beast cavalry. Remember that this area is largely ranch lands, rough and tumble guys, getting them together, getting them to here, getting them organized so they can get put into the lists, if you will. That's going to take some time. In fact, it's going to take 1 week. Nice. So on the 12th, we will have both a slow-moving infantry force, and remember that this is kind of the limit of where you have to come down river. You can pass through these mountains. It's going to be slow going. And we'll check the modifiers in this book to find out how long it'll take. But freeing up, having 2 more battalions, 6 more companies of men over here to go defense, given how long it's going to take to get these units online, I think this war has really turned into a defensive fight. Can Osterregnum hold this line long enough for the situation to stabilize? Can they inflict enough damage on the north that the north just kind of gives up? And that's pretty much where we're at. The only other thing we need to talk about is what's going on here and what the response of this Village 8 is to the arrival of the gendarmes. There's a very real chance that this area, these are miners, also rough and tumble guys, not going to take too lightly to being taken from their lords and masters and forcibly made a part of the Southern Kingdom. So there may be an opportunity for some partisans to arrive, but that is something we'll have to deal with in the next video. Stay tuned for that. I'm having a good time putting this together. I hope you guys are having as good a time watching this. This is kind of a point-to-point campaign, but it's really not. The point-to-point is the easiest way to move troops around your country, but the way this is developing, it may be faster for these troops if the Navy can secure control of Lake Schneider here. These guys might do better to move cross-country, hop across the lake and lay siege to Blacktree. Or do they take the slightly faster route and have to lay siege to these towns? That's going to be an important consideration. So maybe we'll run a full siege. Let me do a little bit more reading, a little bit more research, and we'll come back. We'll circle back to on all that we've really defined so far is the battle up through the 7th and 8th. Then we can do like the next 5 days we'll be securing this. And then, of course, on the 12th, that's when additional forces come online here. Additional forces come online here on the 17th. So we'll just take it a little bit at a time, few days of development at a time, and that's all we got to do. It's a solo war game. You can take your time, and we are going to try to keep this as close to one-to-one time as possible. It keeps us motivated, it keeps us focused, and it keeps us honest with how long it takes to do these things. And it does help to put us in the driving seat. It puts us into the mindset, in the chair of the guys who are running these 2 armed forces. I got to make a decision. I can't just wait forever and mull this over for weeks and weeks. Things are progressing. Got to go. Speaking of got to go, I got to go. Till next time, I'm praying for you.